Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's special edition of Pixels to Politics. I'm your host, Dougie, and tonight we're diving into the fascinating world of game design. Joining me is a very special guest, none other than my brother, who's currently mastering the art of creating captivating gaming experiences. As we journey past the halfway mark on our program, we'll explore the intricacies of game development, the trends of shaping the industry, and the future of gaming as seen through the eyes of an emerging game designer. So buckle up and get ready for an insider's look into the world that bridges creativity with technology. Let's get started. And I wanted to start with Palworld because, you know, it's
Fair
uh
enough. Fair enough.
it's this month's flavor.
It's
Um
a it's a addiction. Yeah.
so the easiest thing to get into is it a Pokemon knockoff?
I feel like to just call it just a Pokemon knockoff isn't accurate, even though it definitely hits a lot of things that are just. It feels like a straight rip from Pokemon, especially the design on the pals. But it gives a very Arc, uh, Rust, Pokemon. It's that the extra survival they add to the game, plus the kind of trying to take down these boss monsters that a lot of times you gotta do it by hand or with whatever weapons you craft alongside the pals that you've collected. So I feel like it hits so many different genres at the same time as being referred to as the Pokemon clone, because it just surface level it looks like the Pokemon clone, but like as you go through it and play it, it's just there's a lot more to it. It's just design wise, it's hard to get past.
Yeah, I think weirdly this game is very emotionally charged for people. Like I've seen people just completely like flame it for no reason. Again, like calling it a Pokemon knockoff or just saying it's every game combined into one. But it's like if it's every game combined into one, then like
Then it's
it's
true
an
game.
original game. Yeah, like it's not a copycat. Like what are you talking about? Um,
Uh, a lot of the hate that I've been seeing has been, though, especially that's related to the fact that it's coming across as a Pokemon knockoff, is they're calling out the fact that it seems like they took AI generated versions of like the Pokemon. So instead of designing like a very close copy of whatever Pokemon they're ripping off, they're saying that or people are claiming that it's like they took an AI generated new version of it and then went with that because it's so close but then it's like slightly off in some way.
yeah, I was watching Moist Critical, and he did a little video on it, and they were comparing the models. I'm completely against the idea that they're copying it all. One, because taking one of the little penguin, the ice penguin in Palworld,
Mm.
I saw two different. One was a video, another was an article that was comparing it to two different Pokemon. And they're like, oh, it's the exact same, and it's just like I think if this little Pal thing it looks like two different Pokemon, then that says more about Pokemon than it does Palworld. You know what I mean? Like, if you can't figure out which Pokemon it actually looks like, then I think that, maybe Pokemon is the issue here with just spamming as many Pokemon as they can.
The, the problem here is you can't just take animals from our world, smash
Mm,
them together, and give them powers anymore,
yeah.
unless without being called like a Pokemon rip.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, Pokemon is just different real life animals mixed with other animals or objects, and then given some element or typing to unique, make them unique.
Yeah.
So if another game does the same thing of taking an animal or multiple animals and then adding an element to them or something, then of course it's going to come across as the exact same thing. But the game's not heavily focused. It's more survival focused and boss focused. And so and I guess the number one thing people keep saying that's different is you're not going to find a gun
Yeah.
in
Yeah, true.
Pokemon and be shooting the Pokemon. Whereas pals, not only you gonna be shooting the Pokemon, you might be handing your pal a, a gun and letting them run off. So
Yeah, I don't think they're completely um not guilty. Obviously, there's like some things that you're like, you probably could have done differently. Like I do think Digimon has always done a good job at differentiating,
mm,
their sidekick characters than what Palworld has done. But yeah, that being said, I don't think they're that alike. Um, even one of the biggest, like one that everyone jumps on is the Vulpix and Foxparks. Um, but like that's not original to Pokemon. That creature's from Finnish mythology. So like, and that's not the only one. There's plenty of Pokemon that are based on, you know,
there was
myths
another
from.
one that's definitely getting a lot because it just seems like a recolor, and I think it was I believe it's for Palworld Verdant. It's like this kind of kickboxing type grass type, and they're comparing it to I don't know the name of it, but it was in one of the most recent Pokemon games, and it's just it's like a bunny starter that's a fire type, and it's pretty
Hmm,
much like a kickboxing fighting style as well. So it's like flipping from uh fire to grass. And I'd seen a video recently that was talking about how to change verdant more to make it more unique and not like a recolor,
yeah, I think they
because
could
even
have.
some like color flavors it just the color palette is still like it feels similar as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think they could have made some changes, but I've seen people really come at this with like all the heart and passion they would for, genocide or something. Like I just think it's the worst thing they've ever seen in their entire life. Um,
I think it's just the kind of cult attachment that comes with Pokemon, because people don't come out after a bunch of other games that just feel like, well, if you go from playing Rust to playing Ark, or you go from like Forest to playing Rust, it's just games within the same genre feel so close to the same. Uh, Playing Dead by Daylight to playing, Friday the 13th, it's you can call any of those like rips with slight changes.
yeah, for sure. Well, I'm glad we're on the same page here. But yeah, the other thing was in the video that really bugged me. So Moist, in general, said he liked it. He loved the game. He was like, "This is great." He was defending it the whole time. And then he also got to the part where there was the rumor of AI being used. And then he said that if AI had been used, he would change his entire mind on the game. He would hate it. It'd be the worst thing on the planet, and blah blah blah. And I think this comes to like a more overarching umbrella of opinions, but I don't understand that sentiment at all. Like even just saying, "Oh, AI was used in the game making process," that could mean something as little as like the little descriptions that pop up when you catch the pals. Like it could mean that. Two, obviously something as big as, oh yeah, it just made the whole fucking game. But like, why the change of opinion just because AI was used in the process?
I
Like,
feel like it's the same thought process as, people wanting to go to their a local business instead of a franchise business. It's the same. It's probably not the same level of picking one over the other, but it's the same kind of feeling. People want stuff made by people. They don't want any like AI to be involved in it for whatever reason. I have a negative feeling towards AI, but I've accepted the fact that it's going to be used as a tool, either very little or very heavily in any of the like any life process now as time goes on.
I think, yeah, for sure. In general, I think most people will end up changing their minds, whether it's by choice or just because they have to. But it kind of reminds me of the times when people would say that digital art, like the stuff you would draw with paint and stuff, um,
Mm.
wasn't art. Do you remember that? When that was a big thing, they're like, "That's not art. You drew it on a
People
computer."
got mad about the tools that are at your discretion
Yeah,
on on the computer, and immediately try to disqualify it as art.
yeah,
And my main thought on that is, well, we can just keep taking stuff like that, like done by other people, all the way back to like ghostwriting for music, songs, movies,
Sure,
just
100%.
books. Instead of having another person ghostwrite that you're, claiming that, you did it over, you're now claiming it over AI, which again was probably set up and kind of guided by a person.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, as someone who's used it a lot to create stuff, I definitely, it feels original to me. Obviously when I get the finished product. And it's not like if me and somebody else set out on the same journey using the exact same tools, I guarantee you it would look completely different behind the scenes. Like it wouldn't look the same. Um, but yeah, it is kind of normal, I guess, for people to um, just be rebellious, I suppose, or just hate on whatever the next trend is, or change. But it's just kind of annoying. Like, just shut up.
but
Like,
just on the like how I feel about Power World right now,
mhm.
I I feel like most of the problems I have is just mainly from learning how to use Unreal now throughout my degree program. And some of the stuff I look at, I'm like, it's early access, so I can't like hate on it, but it's just I can see some like lazy moments of like setup where it's like some of the movement, the animation hasn't been adjusted to be more, fluid. It seems like the base level movement animation you would see on like a standard Unreal project when you open up with the base kit. Some of the animation transitions, they seem like they aren't properly looped to be, just a nice clean movement. It gives off this almost kind of jerky feel, and it's hard to tell if I'm seeing it more because I've worked on setting up those loop animations or it's as jerky as it seems,
No,
along with some of like the map details as well, because there's definitely a lot of reused assets to make the world, but when you make a world big enough to the point you're gonna have to constantly reuse assets to save on money, time, and everything else, because that's just how it is.
I'm sure it's you're noticing it because you're behind the scenes and with the stuff. So, is that like a common thing right now for these early access games where they're just kind of reusing assets, and is that them being cheap or they just don't have enough time? Like, what are your feels on that? That kind of is similar to the
Um,
AI thing.
it depends on really the type of company how they're going about it, because early access games, they have a bad rep for kind of a good reason. A lot of them show up, they take your money with the whole idea of we're going to use the money we're in releasing early access to continue the progression into the game is complete and better. Other games have just used the early access as a way of bypassing some other rulings, and like for especially on Steam, for example, you can't refund an early access game.
You can't refund. Oh, hmm.
And so it's that kind of like you're locking yourself into a whatever purchase. And on top of the fact that it's almost every game nowadays is releasing in early access. It's no
Yeah.
longer a group of beta testers are called in, then the next round of testers, a little more open test, and then a released game. We're just getting, you know, early access dropped on us constantly, and it's pretty much gambling to find out is this one going to reach a complete state or not. And you, the only way you can really kind of guide your feeling on it is to see how many updates are constantly coming out to see that they're actually working on it. And if we're going to look at other, games that don't have as much of a backing but somehow took off, we can look at, last month's flavor and
Hmm.
go crossover from Unreal Engine to Unity with the release of Lethal Company,
Oh, yeah.
either fully made by one person or mostly made by one person. And when you look into their background, they only got a few years into like Unity as a software, and yeah, the game has its like some of its bugs, some of its glitches, but it was released as not labeled early access, which is interesting because it's not complete and it's out there that it's not complete, that there's more coming. And it's also not being advertised as we're selling more DLC, which there's been a whole wave in like the gaming community of we don't want to deal with anything DLC. We don't want to buy a game and then have to keep buying other parts of the game. Cause that's just another early access in disguise, honestly.
Yeah, I think there's kind of a shift happening in the market where developers are kind of trying to figure out the best way to capitalize on their market, and it's just rough being a part of the phase because you're right. You have games like Palworld, which is early access. You don't really know what the finished product's going to be. You can't refund it, and it's already $30. Um,
Exactly.
which is that's half the price of what you'd pay for a AAA game. Um, which is kind of nuts. It is kind of crazy. Normally, you would just have an open beta, everyone plays it, they figure out what they need to
Well,
do.
even so, I wouldn't even say it's half the price of a AAA game nowadays, because some AAAs are moving up to
Yeah,
toward $70. On top of the fact that how many AAAs are coming out with a DLC they want you to purchase on top of it, or if it's not a DLC, it's a subscription, it's a season pass.
yeah. You heard China's ban on some of these features.
I haven't, but I don't blame them.
Yeah, they it's under the guise of like it's harming children, and I think the three things were battle passes, um, after you like loot boxes, and daily rewards. I think those were the three big things they were trying to counter. Um,
It's it makes sense because we got daily rewards turning games into this idea of like working a shift,
yeah,
showing up to get a daily reward. You have battle pass as like an early way to attack not just the younger people but everyone, but I guess focus for this on younger generation onto early subscriptions.
yeah.
And then you have what was the other one you listed?
Um, battle pass, loot boxes, and daily
Loot boxes.
rewards. Yeah,
Easy gambling. It's just the
yeah.
early and if it's not, loot boxes, it's just straight gotcha games, which
Hmm.
is when the whole game is based on a loot box, you almost forget, you're just loot boxing.
Yeah, people praised China a lot for that, but I it can be good, but the response has been from AAA developers has actually been, oh, we need to like start a subscription service. Like from now on, we should just start charging straight up subscriptions for our games because $70 isn't cutting the over 250 hours people are getting from these games anymore. Um, it's still kind of being like tossed around. It's not like official or anything, but obviously when you put bans on the ways that these game makers can make money, they're going to push back. And one of them has been, yeah, like pushing for subscriptions for games. Um,
I think the biggest problem is a lot of the games that are getting released are it's just with the way some of the industry is going. A lot of the game designers, level designers, art teams are getting underpaid.
mm,
They are dealing with just unrealistic, release times. And if they don't release it fast enough, there's backlash. You see that a lot with Blizzard, where they failed on both fronts, with Diablo 4 being way later than it was supposed to, poor announcements before it came out, a very shoddy release, and now they're hitting you with like a battle pass and subscription type thing at the same time, while the game is not really giving enough for you to fully contribute to it. And on top of that, one thing I've definitely seen recently that a lot of these AAAs aren't really conforming to is the fact that after COVID hitting and during like the main parts of COVID and up to now, uh, party games and comfort games have been the number one, buys and everything.
Hmm.
And so that's really what's getting indie games to kind of launch higher and higher because, if people aren't meeting in person as much, and then that didn't, even when they can now, it's not becoming the as as normal, or it doesn't feel as normal because of how long they're supposed to be, keeping separate. Like these party games, they fill in the gap. That's why you got Among Us take off. You have Legal Company taking off. You have I think another recent release. I think it's like Party Animals taking off.
I've heard of that one. Party animals.
It's these party type games where they don't last long. They don't cost. I think the most expensive of everything I listed was $20.
I mean, that's still. I I think that's still kind of on the higher end.
I would
Like,
I would say it's higher end, but at the same time, with these AAA games, you're expecting to spend 60 to 70, then you're expected to drop 10 to 15 for a battle pass, or you're expected to drop 15 to 20 for like a season pass. And so they're going from being like one third or less of the price of a AAA game to a one fourth or less because of all the extra fees you're getting hit with right after buying the game.
so which of the methods of making money for a developer do you think is best?
I think full games should just be released. I wouldn't have a problem with a $70 AAA game if it meant I got the full game, and if you released up the DLC content, it was like an extra update. It wasn't I'm constantly paying another, I got the 60 to $70 game, then I got the 20. AAA will be fine with just that pricing. Indie games are fine with their pricing because I'm not supposed to be getting the same type of content with each game. If I want like the, full either solo play or massive online play, but with tons of story and elements, I expect AAA to deliver with like $60 to $70, worth of a game. For an indie game, I expect it to be a very like repeatable play, but I'm doing the same thing over again, which is why they indie games probably are going to be called more flavor of the month games
Yeah,
than AAA games because after a month of playing, that game, it's will it make it a second month? Will it not? While a AAA game should definitely last several months, if not the whole
even
year
longer.
of
Yeah,
just yeah.
yeah. I think GTA is like the easiest one to point out for AAA games. I actually think Rockstar was one of the people who came out and said that maybe subscriptions um, could end up being a thing for AAA games, but it does seem a little kind of crazy that they spend 8 years working on the next big title, um, and you do get an insane amount of hours from those games. Like it is kind of crazy. I thought I would disagree with the developers in terms of um, the pricing, but I actually kind of agree that like you games have gotten so crazy compared to when I was a kid when you were playing PS2 and you had the Star Wars game whatever and you play for like 5 hours. That game cost like $20, you know, and now for triple the price you get like over 250 hours or like like just almost an infinite amount of time on the game pretty much until the next one comes out. It's like 8 years worth of gameplay. That's crazy. That's so crazy. We definitely won in that field as gamers. Like we are kind of spoiled.
100%. And on top of that, I think the games that, for indie and AAA, this is for both, that end up doing better are the ones that um kind of allow for more easy modding.
Yeah,
Because not only does their game, excel at making, tons of game time to, bring in more people to continuously buy the game until they end up, kind of stalemating, which is why the subscription is kind of being brought up. The battle pass is being brought up because they're no longer making money after the game after their major sales. But I feel like something needs to be done to kind of I feel like companies should be reaching out more to like some of the major modders in the community because Like a game that I immediately think of when it comes to modding is I think of Minecraft. Minecraft was sold what over 10 years ago at this point,
I think it's even
and
longer.
it's probably getting closer to 20 years, but it's up there in years, but it is lasting long in people's lives purely because you can beat the game, you can play it in creative, you can beat the game with friends. They're occasionally dropping updates, but that's a whole new, can of worms that's not going so well on their part. Then you have the modding community that is constantly dropping different ways to play the game, almost full game makeovers to which make the game replayable. I think I've beaten Minecraft for like over 10 something times, and each experience has been drastically different than last.
Sure, and Minecraft is cheap, isn't it? It's like $15, I think.
Um, I think 25
Okay,
actually.
well, it's
I'm
still
not sure.
that's not bad. I mean, you can't beat that.
For how long it's lasted out there, and just on the a quick sample on like the can of worms that they're having going through on their updates is people that have Minecraft, they're waiting 2 to 3 years for every time Mojang wants to drop a new mob.
Yeah, I heard
Yet at
about
the
this.
same time, we have the modding community that adds mods on mobs on their own and show how easy it is to use the software and the build that Minecraft is on to essentially make a new mob, make it work. There's no reason it should take Mojang 2 years to drop a new one. And my only argument against that is when was the last time majority of these people paid Mojang?
Yeah,
Because other than them having their realm servers, where which are new, but you can't really mod their realm servers, they're not really getting like a consistent like source of income from a lot of the player base anymore. It's like you bought the game once, 10 years over 10 years later, they're still dropping the occasional new mob or new terrain or new anything. Kind of gotta consider it a gift. I get the annoyance because people have shown how easy it is to add a new thing, but at this point, it people shouldn't be worrying about what they're gonna add because they've gotten your income for years, and the fact that they're giving anything, it should just be kind of they still acknowledge your game exists.
yeah, you're not wrong. I don't. I wonder if there are some more like grounded reasons for that. Like maybe they just really want to make sure that these mobs don't break the game and there are no bugs, or um, I'm sure maybe there's a selection process, or maybe there's just not that many people still working on it. But no, you're not wrong
I,
that uh, we really don't deserve anything more like from a $25 game that's 10 years old or over 10 years old. But,
yeah, I would have to think there's just not that many people still working on it.
yeah,
Which if you go and look at the community for it, they'll still say they don't need that many people, but that has to be left alone.
for sure. Um, so I've kind of seen Palworld jump to number two, I think, on the Steam charts. Um,
It was like, it's definitely top three. I can't remember if it was number two, number one. Either way, it jumped up there insanely fast.
yeah, it broke some record or like came close to it. However, I think we've already started to see a drop in play rate, at least from streamer side. I know a lot of streamers have already kind of played through it. There's not that much content left, and the everybody seems to already be jumping ship. Uh,
Oh, it's already an well, it's an early access game, so there's not going to be a whole lot of content. Um, with the fact that it's early access, there's been already like a whole bunch of things that either come across as unbalanced, exploitable. Um, People have already spent their whole first 2 weeks of the content creators have already spent their first 2 weeks of the game getting release, getting as much content, either playtime, guides, exploits, all that, put
mm,
out as fast as possible. Um, and then there's the group of people that are afraid to kind of jump on ship with the game purely because they're like, oh, it looks like a fun game, but I don't want to buy it and then immediately have the company sued and not, continue it. Which even with that party existing, some are still caving, and the game already made tons of money anyway.
Yeah, Nintendo actually put out a statement when it came to Palworld already. They said they were investigating some stuff, but it seems like they're more after the modding community than anything else. Um, somebody,
They want to get enough legal ground, and the mod that came out, especially that
it was a
just
straight
made it
copycat.
Pokemon.
Yeah,
It just straight put Pokemon. It replaced all the PAL avatars with the Pokemon avatars.
yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, they got shut down instantly. They didn't stand a chance. They didn't have to look for legal ground. It was all presented on the table.
Yeah. A lot of people wouldn't even pick up hosting mods for the game just because they know that Nintendo would immediately go after them, which is kind of fair. I think the fact that Power World is still up is kind of impressive. I don't. We'll see what happens, but
Right.
I'll say this: I'm kind of not a fan of the Pokemon games. I like the idea of Pokemon. I think it's great, but I kind of hate what they've done with that universe in general. I think they've just kind of bled it dry, and this is something most critical I should brought up, but they have like refused to innovate the games in quite a while. And the games to me have always been kind of boring. It's like the concept is so great, but the balancing is always so terrible. Like you can walk in with, your Chikorita and blast some high level water type and pretty much one shot it just because grass counters water. Um, and it's been the same gameplay over, 10 years or however long Pokemon's been out. Like it's been exactly the same. Nothing's changed. And this game proves that you could make something incredible. Like you have all of this lore and world already built, and you've just done nothing with it since you've had it. You've just put out the same exact game, you know, since you've built it. And it's just like, dude, you're one of the most recognized brands in the whole world. Like, what are you doing? Pokemon Go is the greatest thing you created in uh quite a while, and that was through a third party developer. That was like it was basically leased to them. It wasn't even commissioned by them. So it's like, what are you guys doing? I don't understand.
See, the thing that gets me on that front is, um, once a company kind of grabs hold of an audience, especially an audience that's going to give them a very cult-like following, then they don't feel the need or force to change as long as they keep that following. Because they're think of every game that's constantly, making enough sales to keep going. That's just releasing the same game over and over again. It's not just Pokemon. It's the Call of Duty games. As far as
Oh
I've
God.
dropped off playing them, but as far as I've been hearing through reviews or call outs at game awards, their stories are getting shorter and they're just releasing the same content over and over again. It's just a different gun or a reskin of the gun. Maybe it is the same one. It's more futuristic, it's more past. It's the
Yeah.
same game over and over again, but
They've
it still
yeah.
grabs an audience anyway because the audience shows up for it.
I think Call of Duty has done a slightly better job than Pokemon, just because I do think they've tried. But I mean, there's only so much you can do with guns, like so many different ways you can have guns. But they've had some bangers, Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops was it Black Ops or Black Ops 2 is known as being pretty good. Um, their first few
That's
games
when the
were
story was longer and they put more work into them, and the
yeah.
story keeps getting less and less work.
I'm sure yeah, now it's
And
poop.
that's kind of the blame on a bit on the battle royale, uprise,
Yeah.
because battle royale started getting more work put into them than any of the other story content. Uh, you know, the biggest thing that I hated was I hated on Fortnite because I was so excited for the game to be released because of this new big open world or open world-ish type survival game against zombies, building your own bases, and that part of the project suffered heavily because they needed to bring in some income, and they're like, hey, enjoy the gameplay through this battle royale while we finish our survival game that we're advertised and sold to you, and then the battle royale took off, and then not only did it take off, it was using the battle pass system that was helping fund, the story kind of game, which end up not really going anywhere, and the battle pass and the battle royale just funded itself to continuously keep going with the recycle content process. What does Call of Duty game? What do the Call of Duty games do? They do their war zone. So now you're doing either battle royale and Fortnite battle royale and PUBG battle royale and the Call of Duty games. It's just becoming like a new or new den oversaturated market.
Yeah. I'm hoping that AI controlled NPCs will actually turn the market in the opposite direction where it'll make it fun to like, you know, defend yourself against zombies again because they're adapting to what's going on in the map or what you're doing, or they're just smarter in general, or not just zombies, but NPCs and shooting games, like Modern Warfare or Call of Duty. I'm hoping that's what happens. I think that's what will happen. Because I mean, imagine the zombies that you're usually trying to defend against. You can't just stand on a platform and like that's it. You can't just like run them around an object. Maybe they can communicate, or maybe they just like actually are literally thinking to some degree, shape, or form. Um, I'm
I
hoping
think
that's
the
what happens.
biggest I think the biggest problem with that is uh the people that are against AI, and I'm in some aspects against, some aspects I accept, other aspects I kind of, I support. But the people that are 100% against it are going to be, from the design side, they're not going to want to work with um, setting up AI to do a lot of the work in their games, even if it's just, the thinking for NPCs, or and especially artwork wise, people have been hating on AI
Foaming at the
art
mouth.
for just absolutely losing it over it, and
Rabid dogs. They'll lose their mind
I
for sure.
I kind of find that reasonable because a bit of what makes art is like the human in it, but at the same time, there are some, like, some environmental terrains. A little bit of AI help will, be good there, but at the same, it's just still calling it art is gonna, end up angering so many people.
Yeah. I don't.
And then, okay, here you go.
I was just gonna say that like it kind of comes back to the whole it's digital, and people were like, oh, digital art isn't real art. I do think AI is like the far end of that spectrum where it's like yeah, that the machine is it's you can get the machine to pretty much do everything. It's pretty hard to call like the way it's prompted uh,
Art.
art, um, but there will be in places where it's not um, distinctly sold as art, but it's more used to create, say, assets. Like you were saying, a lot of developers just kind of just take the pre-made assets and use them. AI there can help, right? Because it can just diversify the assets and just a little bit more time added. And like, what's the big deal? What's the difference between you using everyone using the exact same already generated art versus an AI just coming in and diversifying a little bit. Like I think sprinkling it here and there kind of helps. And even if like the NPC part, where if it's just controlling the NPC, uh, I just think humans in general we've beaten the programming for NPCs. We've beaten it. It just it we've just we know all the tricks. We know how to abuse vision. We know how to abuse height. We know how to abuse obstacles. Like we're just really good at it. So I don't I don't even know of any game where you play and you're like, wow, the NPCs here are really good. The programming in Dark Souls, I suppose, is like what you could bring up. But even then, that game kind of relies more on the here's this move, you need to perform an action to get out of the way, a very reactive thing. And then once
Yeah.
you know all the moves, you've got it right. But imagine one that was kind of moving very freely, like it wasn't just swinging horizontally, but it was coming down from the top when it thinks you're just standing there, or chucks its weapon at you just because you're too far, like stuff like that.
Yeah, it'll definitely change. just how people go about games. And you brought up, the Dark Souls games, and when I think,
Hmm.
the Souls games, I'll think of like an Elden Ring fight, and one of the, any of the fights I had a hard time with. Once you've lost to it a few times, you're kind of going in with the mindset of, I'm gonna do this, it's gonna react with this. I will
Hmm.
do this better, it's gonna react with this. I'm gonna do this, and so it becomes a very repetitive thing until you're just reaching a perfection hit. Whereas if it had a more, like an AI kind of learning to it, you would be having different fights entirely,
Yeah.
which people would like and dislike
Yeah.
because it add a whole new level to defeating an obstacle, and some people would not be okay with that,
That's fair.
but it would be a refreshing experience.
I would love it. I want to see it. I want to see people actually having to play against something that is learning on the spot, or can move more freely, has more actions. I think that would be really cool. And hopefully, I assume that it'll come out, and then you'll always have the people who are like, "Yeah, this is great," and the people are like, "Meh." Um, but I'm excited to
There'll
see
always
him.
be hate on everything when it
Yeah,
comes out. That's nothing can be done on that one. It's no matter how good or bad something is, there'll be someone to love it, someone to hate it.
for sure. So as a developer, um, what type of have you developed like a specific genre that you're like super into that you really want to make? I know platforming has always been kind of your thing. Is that like still what you're looking
Um,
for, or?
Platforming was just something I started with because it's just a very easy, starter point to like understand uh the basis of level design. But I'm not really sure what kind of game I want to make because I would definitely prefer to stay more on the indie side of games than trying to be, part of a larger company. But it's still there's a lot of pressure in trying to make an indie game that'll launch because you could spend 2 years working on something and have it just be another forgotten game in the Steam store. Or you could spend 2 years and drop the next Among Us, Lethal Company, um, any of those, indie games where it just 2 years of effort and some updates, and you're making it big. You're making way more than you put into it. But so I'm not sure where I want to go with it. But I just know I kind of want to stay on the indie game side of things.
I gotcha.
There's definitely less pressure on trying to reach some monopolizing point.
Yeah. Among Us actually remained pretty dormant in the market, I think, until COVID, and then they popped off.
I think it was out for a year and a half, 2 years before COVID brought it out.
Yeah. So who knows? It does
Kind
seem
of
like,
stresses the rise of party games because
yeah,
people needed something to do when they're stuck at home.
it was fun. It was a good time. It did start a trend. Now everything is uh brought up. A lot of the games were brought up very similarly to how that game kind of existed, which isn't bad. That games bring people together is nice, but I'm not a fan of the pace at which we go through them. Like it's becoming really quick. We just kind of eat it up pretty quickly, put it down, and then some of the player base is, still there, but most of it isn't, and then we just move on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one.
I know for me personally, when it comes to looking at the different games that I play and or just buy, my level of expectation on what I want to get out of them is if I buy a $5 game, I if I get 5 hours of fun out of it, I paid for me I paid $1 per hour of fun, and I love that game. If I triple the time comparison to the hours, if I put 15 hours into a 5 hour game, I kind of want to recommend it to a friend because I expect they kind of get that kind of same like short lasting feeling. Um, and I feel like I would love to say the same thing for more of the AAA games where you're paying $60 to $70. I want to hope to get 60 to 70 hours of fun out of that game. But at the same time, I feel like in a AAA game, I'm looking for like 60 to 70 hours of like content, not repeatable content. because you can easily get 60 to 70 hours doing a multiplayer match into a multiplayer match into a multiplayer match, and it's not the same level of expectation, which some could argue is unfair, some can argue is kind of fair, because if you want more story content, you definitely, you would think to look more towards AAA, and you want to get like the several hours of story. You want to get even if it's solo story or co-op story. But now with so many things relying on how many times can we get our players to continuously open our games and continue putting more time and more money into the game, multiplayer and just multiplayer matches is kind of the way to go, and it makes sense, but it's unfortunate. And so buying actual content is becoming a thing of the past in some of these games, which is also why Baldur's Gate 3 caught you off guard, because you're paying like AAA price for the game and you're getting so much content out of it. Just endless amounts of content, endless amount of paths, and it's not you're not hitting that repeatable gameplay because I'm going into a matchmaking, that I'm getting out, that I'm going to the matchmaking, I'm getting out, I'm going to matchmaking, getting out. You're getting repeatable content because there is so much just story and elements that make the content repeatable without just doing the same, or pretty much going into the same instance over and over again.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point where the two um, the two styles are becoming made for different audiences, but the AAA is more content focused versus the indie tends to be more party game focused, with some crossover obviously, but
And the amount of crossover is probably why people are getting mad and throwing a lot of hate, because now you're getting some indie games that are releasing for, and the indie game price, that are having more story than more story and maybe even more content than a AAA price. So it's like, well, why keep buying AAA games?
yeah, yeah, it's not bad. Competition is good. This is capitalism at its finest.
Yeah,
These
it's gonna breed more games.
yeah. I definitely think we're spoiled as gamers. I really do. I think like every
100%.
month there's some freaking amazing game coming out that's just so incredible. Like imagine in any other industry. Imagine it in the book industry or the movie industry. Imagine every month there's just some crazy banger that everyone needs to go watch or read. Like, we are so spoiled as gamers. But yeah, the competition is nice. I think it'll help push AAA games to higher places, and even the indie field. Like this game, Palworld, I think will do. I think it's gonna do wonders for gaming, like in general. I think a lot of already established universes are gonna want something very similar to this. Um,
They're
where
gonna
I,
want to step out of whatever comfort zone they've been
mm,
standing in for too long.
yeah, 100%. And like you said, it's not that hard. These guys haven't you know done anything that's so crazy. They've mostly put together games that have already existed.
And
So
combine their elements.
yeah. So I'm looking forward to what comes out after this. There's no way Pokemon sleeps on this. Like there's no way they can just let this go on and not do something about it. Even if they shut down Palworld, they have to put out something that competes with it. Otherwise somebody is going to put out a game that isn't, is similar but is if different enough that it can compete directly with Pokemon. They have to do something now to really kind of recapture gamers. So I'm looking forward to the competition.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna need some new form of uh some new mechanic, something fresh to really bring it out, because even with the their newer games where they gave a little more of a 3D element, it's still that 3D element makes it feel open worldish. You're still walking on the same map, the same very kind of railroaded kind of guided system, completing a dex, gym, dex, gym, dex, gym, dex until you get to the end. Occasionally they add the extra, battle tower or, you know, I think a few of the games had the beauty pageant for your Pokemon,
Oh
and
yeah, that's right.
it more recently you had more camps to kind of interact with them, but it's a very like limited space that there's no real reason to stay in there too long.
Yeah, it's a little ridiculous. Like you could very easily, I don't know, Pokemon again. There's just so much that already exists with them. They could pretty much make any type of game they want, and it would probably at least be somewhat successful. But they've really just kind of done very little with it, and it's just depressing. They could have done an open world game, like a true open world game similar to GTA. The one that kind of came to mind for me just now was Harry Potter, the Legacy game. It's actually very similar to um, Palworld ish, where you have the open worlds, and it's just obviously very polished, right? You have the open
Hmm.
world, and then it's filled with Hogwarts and Hogsmeade and all the places, and you can fly around or walk around, and there's a lot to explore. There's I'm just surprised that very few developers have explored that type of game. Like it's definitely very doable, even if you do a like a set map. Like it's not procedurally generated. It's just you make it. There's still a lot of use from that.
It's the amount of like I guess workers in the field that they can still pay um pay the kind of price and resources to make that kind of product because if people lose passion, then games aren't going to be made that well. If you aren't paid enough, they don't have a reason to try to generate the passion to do what they need to do. And it's we have either companies that are paying too much into the passion and spreading too thin with their projects. And so with them spreading too thin, projects aren't getting enough love, and so we're getting very generic type games, or companies aren't paying any attention to their workers or passion at all, and you're getting generic because they're getting paid generic or even less than generic, and so they're only going to produce generic.
Yeah, but so Power World's made by a team, like an actual dev team. They have like their own website and everything. A
I
Japanese company.
I've heard bits about it, but I haven't fully confirmed anything for myself. It the people working on it definitely come across as I don't want to say amateur because it comes across as a little too harsh,
No, I agree. I think
there
you're correct. I think it does come off as amateur.
but there's definitely a lot of like flaws throughout the game, which I hope are just it's an early access game. Those are the flaws that are appearing in the world. And I'm just like, well, this clipping issue is easily fixed by moving the assets slightly over. So because seeing visual clipping in the maps is kind of like it ruins the immersion on top of like some of the exploits. It just shows lack of a testing team
Mm-hmm.
to really you know put the game for the ringer. Now I don't expect every game to come out perfected and there's no exploit at all, uh, but there's just some. If you're getting an exploit within the first like 20 minutes of gameplay, there probably wasn't as much testing as there should have been. You're probably gonna have like one or two slip through the cracks, a couple, but it's there should be a higher expectation, but it's early access, so I'm still hoping to see do we see a final product so I can
It's
cast like a legitimate judgment.
it's early access for $30 though.
Yeah.
So I think
Well,
it
at the same
should be more
time,
polished for 30
I,
bucks. Non-refundable.
yeah, well, even with that thought process, how well would it go if a company dropped an early access game for like, you know, anywhere between $5 and $15. But after they finished and polished their game, they came back and asked you for the last whatever price of the. For Palworld, let's say they dropped it for 15 early access and then came back and asked you for another 15 after they finished the game. Some people wouldn't go for that because they're like, well, I own the game. Why are you making me pay more? This is just as bad as releasing a DLC.
Well, that's fair. I think there are some ways around it, like Fortnite did. It's not just Fortnite, but other games have done with like the Founders Edition, where you get bonuses.
Mm,
Um, and Power World could do it. Like okay, if you put in a high amount of money, maybe you get some legendary PAL that other people can't get, or maybe you get a shiny that other people can't get, or some kind of
uh,
badge or a gun or an asset of some kind.
yeah. I think the problem here is even early access when done right and meeting the expectations of the player base, which is hard as it is in some cases. Um, it's kind of a worse version of doing the Kickstarters because you pay into a Kickstarter, you're showing whatever you're paying into that you hope it achieves its goal, and then a lot of them will give you some kind of reward, and like you mentioned, they should do for the early access games, but you're also typically only paying once for a lot of those Kickstarter bundles,
Yeah, not
but
wrong.
with early access doing a kind of Kickstarter idea, it just ends up feeling worse because uh, with early access, you're being given a product that is usually broken, unfinished, and not full. When on the opposite side, if you pay the same amount in a Kickstarter, you're throwing the money in because you're throwing it in with hope. You have
Yeah, there's a lot
not
of faith there.
received anything back. Hmm?
But yeah, no, I was just agreeing. It's like a faith thing where you're just like,
Yeah,
please don't
it
screw
is
me
the
over.
fact that it's the fact that one side is paying with faith, while the other side is they're technically paying with faith, but they were handed a product and now they want that product to, you know, keep going and do something.
Yeah,
And
that's
so it's the
fair.
fact that they were handed a product that makes them, angry about what's happening.
There just seem to be a lot of tools right now and ways to launch your game, or get it into early access or just raise funds early for it. I don't necessarily agree with this one. I think this is one where it kind of comes up just a little short. I think the game is great and $30 isn't too bad, but I think
Mm.
it just maybe $10 less would be nice. uh, but I mean, it made a fuck ton of money. I'm pretty sure it came in second for like most sold on Steam or something. I can't remember what the record was, but they
It
did
was either
set a
like
record.
sales or congruent players.
Yeah,
It was one of those.
yeah,
Maybe they made some records in both, but I cannot confirm.
yeah. I know. However, for you, from your perspective as someone who's played it, do you feel like it's flavor of the month and probably in a few short days, everyone will probably jump ship, move on to something else? Or do you think people are gonna like stick around?
I feel like if they take too long, um, getting the uh well if they take too long getting the game out of early access, then it will be flavor of the month and it will just fall off, which at the end of the day they got their money.
Yeah, they did. They
If
got a lot
it
of
gets
money.
Yeah, exactly, but if it gets through early access fast enough, they release new content, they polish the content that's there, it will definitely grab more people and bring more people into the game. But it's about the speed they get out of early access. Because if let's say they don't get out of early access within the next month and a half, then yeah, it's just gonna be a flavor of the month. It's gone. No one's gonna really look back on it. Maybe a few people will be like, oh, we'll go back and try to run it, or end up like one of those games where it fell off, and about half a year to a year later, the people that still kind of try to play it because they still like it, they're not gonna be able to play anymore because the company won't even host their servers anymore. and it's just gonna fall off the Steam store because a few games have done that.
Yeah. I wonder if so the Dark and Darker kind of not the same copyright kind of issue, but something close where um I wasn't following the suit, so I don't know if it's true, but they had gotten sued. The creators of that game had broken off from a main company, and apparently they had taken some assets with them, and then Dark and Darker was kind of built on some of that. And I think even to this day, Steam has not picked them back up. And as the lawsuit goes on, or maybe it's been solved, I don't know. They've actually have been doing it separately, hosting and selling separately on their own website and their own servers. So I wonder if that isn't something that we might see from Palworld if Nintendo really kind of stomped on their throat.
I wouldn't expect it because there's definitely you're gonna need a lot of like a very passionate company and a dedicated company to kind of get that kind of result and that kind of feel.
But yeah,
On top of the fact that company feels that not only are they dedicated enough, but their following is dedicated enough, and if this ends up being a flavor of the month, they're not going to come back to it.
yeah, it doesn't sound like you have much faith in them.
If they follow through on the content, because they dropped the roadmap, which caught me off guard,
Oh,
because they dropped the roadmap during the same either day or within the same few days of Nintendo announcing their stance throughout, their law on how the lawsuit may go down or is going down, and they just dropped a roadmap in response about trying to release arenas, more types of PvP, uh, more islands to the map, and if they follow through with that, the game can definitely keep going, but it's just they gotta release it fast enough.
yeah, I'm looking at it now. These are pretty good. I like the obviously PvP. I think will be huge. I do like the combat system in that game. I think it's pretty cool. Um, the trading pals is kind of whatever. I think it's very easy to, and this isn't on them. It's just that type of genre where it's very easy to collect all of the creatures pretty quickly.
Oh yeah,
Um, so that's kind of whatever. But the building system, obviously, I think there will be people who love that and people who can't really be bothered with the building system in every survival game these days.
I think for the building system, they definitely want to like, yeah, it says that there are improvements to the building system, because for people that enjoy the kind of building aspect, they want to get more out of it. They want to have like a good time with it. But people that feel like they have to do the building aspect so they can enjoy the survival and the fighting, the problems that do exist with the building are just it's tedious enough to make some people stop playing. But it's like once they get it done and knocked out of the way, they can go back to their play style. So it's gonna help the people that don't like building get it done faster because it won't be as problematic or buggy or just having any kind of its issues that it's having now. And for the people that enjoy building, they're gonna get a new, I guess, pretty much world open to them to continue putting more time into the game.
They seem pretty committed. They seem like they really want it to be like a massive online RPG game.
It's just even with the commitments being shown, it's still a time thing.
Yeah.
Because if they don't meet the time, then it's just gonna fall through. Like another early access game I played that I was real excited for, but it just fell off for me because of how long it took was Grounded.
Hmm.
It looked like a super fun survival like the concept being shrunken down into this in a backyard and turning this backyard into this like um horrendously difficult survival world. And if you got into it in the very beginning, you had probably like 2 hours of story. You can enjoy the rest of the survival, but you really only had 2 hours of story to go through.
The only
And
sorry, keep going.
definitely up to this point have released tons of story to make the game fun, but it's the fact they took so long to get there and breadcrumb the story over every several months. It just it really drove it down.
Yeah, they aren't the only ones who's kind of suffered from that. I remember, what's the space game called? Oh gosh, I can't remember the beginning. The worlds are all procedurally generated. It was very empty. You could like
No
travel
Man's
between
Sky.
planets. Yeah, No Man's Sky. That's another one where it was like promised to be this amazing galaxy, universe exploring game. Had no content, and then like years later, they put in a lot of content, but like nobody gave a fuck. Nobody cared. It's just like, dude, your game came out, 2 3 years ago, and now this is like your real game. Like nobody cares anymore. Everyone's moved on.
Yeah, it's just the I'm glad I didn't really hear too much about it in the first place, and then didn't also didn't jump into it because everything I hear about it is just disappointment and hate.
Mm-hmm.
And for a game, from what the game sounded like it was supposed to be, it made large promises and
Oh
didn't
yeah,
deliver on any of them.
no, not at all. I would be, I would be surprised. Not necessarily like happy or sad surprised, but I would be surprised if this game ended up being like, the next uh MMORPG game.
If
Palworld.
it if it isn't, it will definitely set the precedent for
Yeah, yeah. The next one.
yeah.
Which again, I think it's pretty exciting. I think the game has like a lot of aspects that are super great. I think the survival part isn't, too harsh. You could probably add stuff and like tweak things. The base building is good. Obviously, the PAL system is awesome. But if they do expand the game, I think it could be pretty good. The only thing I don't like about these games is the uh, set maps, like pre-made maps. I think it kind of stifles variety of gameplay. Like I like Minecraft procedurally generated.
I I definitely get that, but at the same time, like you're making a sacrifice, or well, you're making a sacrifice or a commitment, depending on what side you land on. If you're gonna do the generated maps or the set map, because with the set map, you have uh the choice of how large the map's gonna be, and you
Mm-hmm.
can definitely add content to that map, and then like if you want to do updates and more content later, you expand the map. When you do the generated map, you're more of trying to figure out how do I get the content that I have here to make sense and continue generating across the world. I think Minecraft works is because no matter where you go, you're gonna find more biomes and more of villages, temples, whatever generated throughout the map, and those will have your pieces of story. And no matter how much of the world you generate, unless you're playing like some kind of modded version, you're playing just straight regular, you know, Minecraft. At the end of the day, your mission is to, survive, get to the Nether, survive, come back, get to the end, defeat the end, and as much as the world generates, you're still going to one singular place at the end of the game because even the end that can continue generating, the main focus of what you're supposed to do when you get there is still a set location.
Yeah, I agree. Quality is a
And
lot easier to control in set maps, and it doesn't change that much. But I think it's just nicer, to be honest. Like I just think it's just a little nicer to be able to walk around like, oh, like, yeah, I have a desert next to a cherry blossom forest. Like how cool is that? Or like there's some reward release whenever you spend the 30 minutes finding that perfect base spot.
oh yeah, definitely.
So on your end, when it comes to developing, have how much AI integration have you seen yet?
On my end, I haven't really seen any because I'm not really working I'm not really learning in the art side of things. and I'm not really working too heavily on the. I'm doing some coding, but I'm not working heavily on the like coding side. Um, I'm going for the basics and understanding of level design, and I feel like out of everything AI should get involved in, the core concepts of level design it shouldn't be involved in.
Hmm. But you do bring up a good point where it is heavily affecting the art department and what was the other one?
The coding department.
Coding department. Yeah, that I guess isn't that surprising. But I have seen some prototypes where you can prompt the AI to build whole worlds in Unity or whole rooms, or even generate assets.
Definitely with the idea of it having it generate a map at the end of the day, I m- I know from my perspective, if you want to, you know, generate a story, you kind of want the map before the story. You kind of want the art after the story because you want, have something to base the art off of. You want the code to kind of, go throughout the entire process because it has to keep up with how the map's going to be, how the art's going to look, how the story's going to go. And I definitely I can support AI in the coding side. It will take some pressure off that and alleviate that. I would rather it not be in the art side, but I feel like it being in the map side, it generating a map could cause some like interesting and some positives and some negatives, of course, definitely on both sides for how a writing team, our team, and probably not the coding team, honestly, would react to a map being generated. Because no matter who, if a person made a map or if AI generated a map, code's not gonna, it's not gonna care. It's going to try. It's going to go out of its way to make the map work, no matter what map's provided. That's kind of just their job.
Yeah.
It kind of sucks, but it's their job. And as for like a generated map, uh, it takes a lot of the kind of like the control that some developers would want on how they want to guide their players. And I definitely would see a lot of maybe not a lot for like the generated worlds, but more on the set worlds where it causes some kind of conflict on how they want to adjust something. Because if you have it generate too much of a map and you want to change one section, that one section now has to meet the standards and that were set by the rest of the map. And so it almost turns into you remaking a map again with just, an idea put in front of you, which that could be helpful to some people, that could be detrimental to others.
I guess that's fair. I think from the way I've used it is I think that's the most perfect use actually is when you want to kind of generate something somewhat blank. Where you're just like, okay, I want a forest, and then it fucking spawns a whole ass forest, and then you can, from like a 3D spatial reasoning perspective, go to a specific area and be like, okay, in this area, we're gonna make a village, and then it creates a generated village. And then you're like, at the city center, I want a guild hall, and then it deletes the center and then creates the guild hall, and then you're like, okay, it doesn't have. I want it to have walls and a moat around it, and then it does that, and then you're like, okay, well, I need to draw a bridge in this area, and that's in my brain. That's how I picture it. And when I was doing maps, generated maps for the D&D, that was actually pretty similar to how I was doing it. Like, it went pretty much like that. And I imagine eventually it will get to that level of control when it comes to
And
map design.
it'll be interesting when it does, because there's definitely a very normal problem just for making a map from nothing as a person, because a lot of people end up running into the problem of that kind of blank screen problem,
Mm-hmm.
that blank canvas. Where do you start? Where do you go? What do you sculpt to get the world started? And so I definitely think a little bit of AI there. I I fully support. but anything beyond like getting kind of like a starter grasp on where you're going, I'm kind of against. But that's probably a little biased because that takes away from my job.
Well, I think a lot of people agree with you, at least on the last part. People will probably disagree in general with the whole and it in any part of the thought process. But I do think when most people think of it's AI generated, they think, oh, so you did nothing. You just told it, I want to build game, and then it built game for you. I think that's like kind of the linear thinking that a lot of people run through when they hear, oh, AI was involved in this. It just you said build game for me, please, and then it did its thing, which I think is ridiculous. If you,
Then
yeah,
also on like another standpoint, I feel like there's going to be an expectation of if they feel like the fact that AI was involved, you didn't do anything,
yeah,
they're going to want more done because obviously, if that's the way they're thinking, they're going to expect you to have more free time in your hands. You better be delivering somewhere else.
there's been
Because if there
sorry,
isn't delivery somewhere else, then pay should be cut on how much the
oh,
like
I'm
the game's
sure,
worth.
especially from the top. I'm sure CEO hears up. You're using AI, and then we can chip some off your paycheck, buddy. You clearly weren't doing anything. But I think in general, besides these like negative stereotypes with it. It'll speed up process. It'll it'll help developers in any field spend time working on more specific areas, the more detailed areas that you really want to put your time towards, or even just help you get started again with like a blank map that a lot of people are like, I don't know where to start. But you're just like, I want to start a forest, and then it builds it. And then you can kind of go around the areas and do your normal developer thing by yourself. Um, but my favorite thing so far has been there's been a book and there's been an art piece, and both of them have won awards. And the quote unquote creators, depending on which perspective which side of the fence you're on, came out and said, "Oh yeah, by the way, we generated this with AI." And the backlash has been so insane. I mean, these people are getting completely ostracized. They're getting as much hate and death threats as you can imagine. Like, people absolutely hate them for this. But it's pretty funny that as much as people tout as like AI not being able to create something or be original or like really compete, it already has. It's already done it. Uh,
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting take.
Yeah, yeah. People really didn't like that at all. Both of them pretty much got kicked out of whatever communities they were in, and yeah, people are gonna refuse to work with them or interact with them. But I do think it's a testament to like the quality it can be used to produce, and in gaming where it's pretty unregulated, and it'll get used I think more quickly than some of the other areas or industries. Um, I just look forward to it. I think it'll be very interesting, especially when it comes to NPCs. That's where I really want to see it.
I think it would like in any part that I especially want it to thrive in NPCs.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I wonder. So I have a friend who we were talking about small bots versus big bots, and there's been he does work for Google, and one of the things he does is like polls, right? So they like poll all their users, um, and ask them questions. And one of the questions was, when do you think small bots will be used? Which small bots are there's many of them, but they're not being completely utilized just yet. And he thought he's a very smart dude, so I trust his opinion or I value it. But he thought that the small bots wouldn't get used for at least 2 more years. Small bots being like GPTs or virtual assistants and stuff,
Mm.
which I disagree with. I think it'll be much sooner. I think like Matt, I'm thinking closer to 6 months. But in the big industry, it's getting used right away. Like there's been a lot of layoffs, and a lot of the big uh, industry leads, especially if it's a tech leader, they've already announced like AI. replacing people right away, like immediately. Just if you can be replaced, you've been replaced.
Yeah, and that's my main concern with the whole thing. I get it. It's just a normal process. We get a new tech, we get a new advancement, layoffs come and remove that type of job, and a new job has to be kind of formed or found. And I think a good chunk of my dislike is just being part of, this wave's kind of find your way with it or around it,
Mm,
or I'm just not gonna have a place.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the difference here would be like it's much faster than every other time we've had such a innovation. You know, like when
Yeah,
printing press came out, obviously a lot of I forget what they called the people who did the stamping for books and writing. But obviously they all got replaced really quickly, and like that's pretty devastating. Um, However, we're talking about an innovation that will change pretty much every industry already in existence. You know, and it'll happen really fast. So I think there like is reason for legitimate just concern here. You know, like
oh
for
yeah.
sure people should kind of be sweating a little bit. So like that feeling is definitely justified. Um,
Also kind of the reason I wanted to go more into indie than big company, because I can choose to use AI, I can choose not to, and if I do choose to use AI, I can control it without the fear of really replacing myself.
mm, true, not wrong. What would your if you were excited for it? Which aspects would you be interested in using it in for your work? Story, map generation,
It would
NPCs.
it would definitely be more on the NPCs and like assisted in map generation. I wouldn't want it involved in story at all. I'm definitely 100% against it being involved in story. But even saying I wanted to kind of help with NPCs, that technically is going to have to have it help or be involved in story in some way. But I want story to be primarily me or just primarily human in general.
Mm,
NPCs, it's difficult to, or well, I'm not gonna say difficult. I'm more like difficult for me to make conversations that don't come across as set and make enough that they're not going to find the end of whatever an NPC's rotation is. And having a more AI generated type NPC interaction stops that hitting that wall of, oh, you've already hit every interaction you could have with this person.
yeah. It allows for more depth too, where I hate to fucking bring this up, but the whole dating sims in every game. I,
Yeah.
Obviously, it's just the easier subject to approach because it's the most widespread, but um, yeah, it just gives more depth to each of the NPCs. So you could write the foundation to it. I hate to say the word prompting again, but you could prompt the NPC to exist, give it a specific personality. You can even give it like phrases that you would want it to say, and then
Oh,
the
yeah,
AI would be
100%.
able to derive, what it should say from that. And it's really good at it. It's amazing at it. So it would increase depth a lot. It's just yeah, there's just
Yeah,
backlash.
100% support, it's use in like making NPCs have more depth. But then another concern comes in on just, AI generated voices after it like captures your voice to keep going. I feel like that's a whole nother like that's a whole nother feeling in itself.
Yeah. Uh yeah, that one's tough
I can't
too.
even begin to understand how, you know, s- actors, artists, and all that would feel about just, you only have to say like a sentence, maybe not even that, and it has your voice to keep using for whatever it generates and says.
Yeah, a good model can pretty much use like 15 seconds of your voice and immediately copy it. It's crazy.
At that point, you're kind of just sitting there like, as the person that provided the voice, should they just be paid a lump sum? Should they be paid like in a royalties type situation? Like, how are they compensated for the fact that what used to be, hours and hours and hours, days of, voice acting to, get all the lines done is now I'm handing my voice off to something that's going to do all of that.
It's true.
How much do you price someone's voice?
You bring up a good point for sure. I don't really know. I don't have the answer to that one. I have no idea.
It's a difficult thing to answer.
Yeah. I mean, I assume you just go with, like a contract, right? Where you sell your voice, but you're right. You would get a lump sum, but like, what if the game, like, what if your voice is limited to GTA, and they paid you jack all, but you're, you're, it's, people are experiencing it every hour, all the time, and they love it, and it's great, and you could have made a lot more money. I have no idea. It's like a good point.
And especially if your entire job is based off of just selling, it's selling your voice acting, you're pretty much handing off your livelihood instead of having what would kind of be like a contracted job. You're now contracting away just a piece of your livelihood and having no other attachment to it, and just hoping whatever it is you decided to, I guess, sell it for is worth it in the end.
Yeah, like a prostitute.
I guess, yeah, it's part of it's part of your body, so yeah, 100%.
I just don't know
Uh,
any other
not
way to
not not
describe
the
it.
go-to I would go for, but it uh,
We're
it's
all
part of your
OnlyFans
body.
models. We're all OnlyFans models in the end. Actually, there was a dude, I don't remember who it was, but he was saying that AI will bring about this wave in the way we work, where you would pretty much there will be boards of contracts, like forums where there would be a bunch of contracts, and then you would look for whatever you were good at or whatever you wanted to get into, and you would everything would pretty much be contract work from this point forward. Which I suppose, yeah, some of these fields will just be largely based on that. Where like someone's looking voice for voices. You as a person who provides it would just be like, okay, well, here's this person's looking for a female voice, and they're gonna pay me 2,500 for use of my voice in their game. And you would just click it, and you record your voice, get your money, and send it out. maybe that's what it would be like. You
And
know.
then there's going to be all the contracts and you know problems along with that on, well, how much are you going to be aware of what your voice is used for?
Mm,
Because even if it's only used in in whatever that platform, that game, whatever that you pretty much sold it to, how much control over what your voice will not, cannot, or actually will say does that gets covered in the contract? Because if, especially if you have a very identified voice, or the fact that somewhere your voice is credited to you, there's gonna be arguments on how that crediting works. But then there's gonna be the whole fact that they know it's your voice. Now, whatever it says could be like horrendous. Like imagine someone didn't know when they were getting into like if they were getting into Baldur's Gate and selling their voice there and having the AI generate conversations. In Baldur's Gate 3, there's a lot of remarks that are heavily derogatory towards other races. And it's just part of like kind of D&D lore that that Drow aren't liked
yeah.
across the land, and so there's gonna be a lot of like what is pretty much slurs thrown at them, and if you're not fully aware of what your voice is going to be given to an AI to say, you may not be aware that, hey, your voice is in a top selling game saying slurs.
I
It may
think
not be slurs for like us, and but slurs in the D&D verse.
Baldur's Gate also has a mod where you can sex the characters, right?
It's not a mod. It's you just do. That's
Oh,
part of the game.
oh, oh.
And
Yeah.
so I didn't even get into your voice being used in that.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Like, wow. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot
And
of. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just thinking like with that point being brought in,
Yeah,
and what was the one that just steals the faces? I can't remember the name of that.
the one that steals the
The
faces.
where you take someone's face and you put it on something else.
Oh, deep fakes. Talking about deep fakes.
Deepfakes, that's what it is. Just mods for deepfakes. Now that they have your
Oh,
voice, they mod with deepfakes, and they don't have to mod the other thing into the game. That's just there. So any game that's like that in the future is just how much are you
wow.
aware that your voice just got used for?
I thought I had genuinely thought of everything when it came to AI, and you're blowing my mind right now. Like, man, I
It
just
is just concern.
yeah, no, 100%. I have absolutely no idea. I mean, obviously, the Taylor Swift thing is going on right now, where people are flooding Twitter with her deepfakes or deepfakes of her. Sorry, not her deepfakes, but and that's becoming quite a big deal. Um, but I just have no idea in my brain how they regulate something like that. Like, how do you stop that from happening? I mean, obviously, you could have something implemented in Steam or the workshop or whatever that stops these types of mods, right? That
Even
have
if
like,
something's implemented, people will go out of their way to find a way. And
yeah,
if AI is going to be smart enough to do said thing, AI is going to be smart enough to find a way around said thing.
yeah, and there's a lot of open source software right now when it comes to AI that in America we're allowed to use. You know, in other countries it's pretty limited. You can't just do stuff like that. But in America, because freedom, hell yeah, we can. We're pretty much always be able to do this stuff, assuming they don't impede on our freedoms here, which would make me very sad. But yeah, I don't know. That's you bring up a lot of good points. I honestly have no idea how they stop stuff like that from happening. Maybe we'll just get used to it. Like it won't even matter. It'll just be everywhere. There's nothing you can do about it. That's just like the life we live. That's just what it is.
Just a slow decline into some kind of forced acceptance.
Yeah, yeah. Um, there's Samsung this month had a like a show where they like showed all their new features, and one of them, which really kind of shook me to my core, was a feature in text messaging where you could set an AI to change your messages. So like it would transform them to like a specific mood. So like if you wanted it to change your messages that you sent out to be like a stoner, right? It could do that. Um,
Oh, so now people don't need to have personality. They can just
yeah, yeah. It would do it for you. And it's like absurd to me. It's like you're not even talking to another person anymore. You know,
yeah,
like
the
you,
personalization has been removed.
yeah, completely removed. And like it's a feature that people are going to use. You know what I mean? Like there's no reason they wouldn't. A lot of people feel insecure when they're talking to somebody else. And if they could make themselves sound smarter, right? Make themselves sound cooler. Like why wouldn't you? You know, people already flood themselves or Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat with filter, like themselves covered in filters, right? So like why wouldn't they
So
also filter their voice too?
exactly, if people are looking for a certain like personality, you're already like you said, you're already filtering your appearance. Now you're gonna be faking the entire personality you can generate by just having it change the mood, change the tone, change how you're speaking, and now everyone is really just going to be a whole new like level of catfishing that's just beyond insane.
Yeah. Well, I just it makes me sad that depersonalization makes me a little sad. Obviously, it'd be a useful tool when it comes to answering messages or talking to. It'll be a lot of AI on AI when it comes to outside personal life. You know, when you need to to talk to like a government system or uh, IT for a company or something like that. I think there is useful, but it does make me sad to think that like we could be very close. We probably are very close to a future where instead of people like your friends, talking to each other, it's just AI. it's just you or your AI version filtered however you want, talking to their AI, which is filtered. Me and Michael actually made a joke like this. I think it was last year. We were like, "Hey, bro, hey, one day my AI is gonna call your AI and set a date for us to hang out." And it was a joke, and like I kind of thought about it, but like I didn't think. It's weird experiencing it when I say things out loud, and then a year later it happens. I'm just sitting there with my jaw open, like, "What the fuck? What is going on?"
It, I know people keep making this comment, but it's still relevant. We're just approaching our own Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, yeah. One of those episodes has to come true, right? Like at least one of them has to exist. But I don't want any of them to exist.
All of them are like, and the worst part is how many people would fully notice because since we're watching the show, we're outside looking in, we're seeing the problem in it. But to have a society slowly evolve into it, how much of a problem would it look like to them if it just slowly becomes a thing? You
Yeah,
slowly learn to accept one bit, thing, one other notion, and then eventually, if you were to step back and look at the whole thing again with the same perspective as before, you're just like, yeah, the Black Mirror episode has happened.
yeah. No, you're not wrong. There's a lot of people have brought up the idea that like we're the frogs sitting in the water that's slowly being heated up to boiling. Um, it's pretty fair. It's a good point to bring up. Uh, yeah, I'd hate to end on a somber note though. So maybe we can talk about something
What
nice.
what note do you end on?
Something less foreboding. Maybe like the good uses of AI. There's been a lot of medical breakthroughs, which is cool. I'm trying to think of something more social that would be nice.
I
Uh,
think people with impairments will have a lot
yeah,
of help with this,
yeah, that's true. That's very true.
especially just any form of social impairment where it's something along the lines of like a social anxiety or an inability to understand like a certain social cue. It will help with those people.
Yeah,
But
honestly, no,
yeah,
that's really good.
it'll,
Um,
that's about all I got. That's all I got.
no, I think that's a good one. I think this can be very much used as a great tool for people. Like you can, it doesn't have to have so much direct. It doesn't have to stand in between you and other people or goals or whatever it is you want to do. Like it doesn't have to stand in your path. It can stand beside you and walk with you. It's like here I am talking to said person, and there's something in particular here I don't understand or I don't know how to reply, and I can ask it, hey, like I don't understand what this person is trying to say here. Could you please help me bridge that gap? And then obviously people don't really know this, but it's really good at understanding human behavior. We're not nearly as smart as we think we are. Turns out we're like just as easy to read as ants, or bees. Like we're kind of
Yep.
dumb. But the AI can help, bridge that gap of, oh, this person's, trying to say this, or maybe they're a little upset at you because of this reason. It could end up increasing how connected we are if used properly. Will people use it for that reason? Probably not most of
Probably
them.
not.
Yeah, but uh, yeah, and also for I wonder what that would look like in the autism community. The people who do have that trouble with uh, understanding social cues or just connecting with people in general. Obviously, people with social anxiety. It'll probably help ease them a lot.
I imagine an advancement to the point where the way they're making translators to kind of sit in your ear and live translate just a kind of an AI assistant that translates the social cue to you.
Yeah,
Imagine that kind of advancement.
I think it would be nice. I like that idea a lot. Being able to understand what someone else is feeling without uh having to force them to open up or having to really use all of your brain to figure it out, especially in scenarios where you just can't, if you're just bad at it or if you have a disability when you can't, whatever. Like having that ability would be nice. It's like, oh hey, is here your friend there? Sarah is looking pretty fucking sad, and they give you the opportunity to help said person. Uh,
Yeah,
so that's true. I like that. That's good. I do think there would be a lot of uses for it that will help people advance. It's another tool. It's just another tool, of course.
but every tool can be used the wrong way. So, but they're good things, and hopefully those good things stick.
Yeah. Anything you would like to talk about or say before?
I think we covered more than I expected.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I the next time you come on, hopefully, I get to hear some things about, you know, AI use or something you've developed or some new feature or a new game you're looking forward to develop. Um,
Yeah, and
Something
hopefully
else.
I come back with some more ideas
Okay,
and
well,
progress on my end.
yes, for sure. Um, Thank you for talking with me. It's always nice.
Hey, it's always good to talk, especially current events that are definitely affecting my career. So,
Yeah, everyone's career.
yeah, everyone's career. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. All right.